How do you build a network, run a profitable business, and make an impact? Oh, and have a personal life at the same time? That's the question, and this podcast is the answer. I'm your host, Chaz Wilson, husband, father of five, author of the book 5+1, president and co-founder of Master Networks, Inc., a national networking organization. Look, each week I bring you successful entrepreneurs who will share success strategies of how to effectively build a network, add valuable wisdom to your journey, and help you succeed. Welcome to Connect, Share, and Prosper. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Connect, Share, Prosper. I am so excited today. I'm with a Master Networks member, friend of Master Networks, a truly honor to be with you, Chris Natzke. Thanks for joining Connect, Share, Prosper today.
Great to be here, Chaz. Thanks so much for having me.
So Chris is a member of Master Networks in Colorado, and gosh, I don't even know the story. I know you and I met a few years ago when I was out there one time at a chapter meeting, and I saw you speak, and I was really impressed. I hope I told you. I think I went up and shared with you. I was just really impressed with your message.
Thank you.
And and let me just say this to our audience who's watching, because if you're coming to Connect, you're going to get to meet Chris. There's something about you I just want to share, and I don't know if I've had the chance to share this, but I see a lot of people speak. I get to share the stage with a lot of people, but your message is genuine and authentic, which I think is becoming people sometimes do show, right? It's like they get on stage and it's a show, and you're just so real. And I appreciate that about you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
But I don't know, we met a few years ago when I was out there doing something for Master Networks, and I just have found a great liking to who you are and what you do. So thank you for who you are.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that, Chaz.
So Chris, tell me now, I know you've got this extensive martial art background, and you speak about that and you train about that. And that's the Chris Natzke that everybody knows today.
Right.
What do we not know? Who's the Chris Natzke before Chris Natzke, right?
Well, maybe some things that people don't know is, I grew up in southeastern Wisconsin, a short little chubby kid, and really, martial arts is what really turned things around for me. And that's really the basis of my story. But I was also I spent 10 years in the corporate world prior to going off on my own. I worked for Procter & Gamble for 10 years right out of college. Wow. And actually had a great experience with them as a sales manager. I also was a college football player at Northwestern University. So it was a great experience. And I had the dubious honor of starting the game where we set the longest losing streak in major college football history at the time of 38 straight games. So I've got that in my resume as well.
Wow. So what position did you play in football?
I was an inside linebacker. Inside
linebacker. So you know how to hit and tackle.
That's right.
Right. And so from southern Wisconsin, and you said, chubby kid isn't it funny how, by the way, I've said this in many episodes in the past. So for those who've watched many of our episodes or listened, if you go back and listen, then we talked about things from our past as kids and how that just carries with us.
Totally.
Right. So yours was, and you said chubby little kid. I was the redheaded kid that got picked on all the time. Isn't it amazing how these things that just carry with us and create this kind of fight in us as entrepreneurs?
Oh my gosh. It's so true. And in fact, I actually wrote about it in my book. I had the story when I was 8 years old of being around the neighbor kids. And one of the ringleader at the time, his name was Johnny, and was talking about what it meant to be in shape. And I was by no means in shape at that age. And but I was totally into superheroes and everything. And I said, Johnny, am I in shape? And he said, yeah, Chris, like a watermelon. Oh. And, that was one of those things that just hit deeply. And what I realized, though, that ended up being something that really spurred me on for many years, And God bless him. He's a great guy. Actually, we're friends. And it was just a kid saying something, but you don't realize how that impacts you at such a young age.
Yeah, the things that you say, right? So, when did you get into the martial arts? I'm just curious.
I started at age 10. So okay. I was, and at that time, the Bruce Lee craze had just started. It was in the early 70s. And there was a TV show called Kung Fu.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was totally into Kwai Chain Cane and Grasshopper and begged my mom to let me go to my first class. And I went there and literally, Chaz, I felt like I came home. It was wow. Where has this been in my whole life?
Yeah. What if you could look back and say, so you say like you came home, was there something about it that said, this is home?
It just felt natural to me. It just felt like everything, flowed for me when I was in that environment. And back in those days, many people connote martial art training with kids nowadays, right? You think it's a kids activity. That was not at all the case back in those days. That didn't happen until the Karate Kid movie came out in 1980. Before that, it was a bunch of 20-year-old guys. So I was one of only 2 kids that was training in this class, but it didn't matter to me. I just fell in love with it.
Isn't it fun? Like as business people, entrepreneurs, there's this feeling of belonging we always have. And I've often heard like people say, when I come to Master Networks, I come to connect, like I feel like I'm at home, which is interesting as you say that, like it feels natural, so you find this natural thing with martial arts. And so like, obviously that still portrays to what you do and how it impacts you today. But when it said it was natural, but was it easy for you? Like, did you catch on to it quick
I think I relatively did catch on to it relatively quickly. I mean, it was one of those things that my body just seemed to move with it naturally. And I was an okay athlete at that time, and playing in sports and things like that. But it was just this whole, this feeling of expressing my body in that way. And it wasn't like I was this, a natural fighter. That's not what really brought me to it. But one of the things that I think I realized early on, and it moved into my teenage years as I became a junior instructor, et cetera, was how martial arts could be used as a vehicle. And I couldn't explain it to you that way at 16 years old, but how it was a vehicle for transformation, and that's what I think excited me about it. I loved teaching and I loved expressing myself physically. And so the two just really, it's one of those things where you start to get in connection with the philosophy just by being there. It's not like it's so overt. It's just part of the fabric. And so pretty soon that becomes a large part of who you are.
That's awesome. So that changes you, so I imagine that helped you with confidence, because somebody that's maybe being picked on or whatnot to then go play college football, that's kind of a leap. So
yeah. It became an incredible structure for me. It was a foundation because everything kind of flowed out of it. And I could take those lessons that I was learning in martial arts and I could apply them to school. I could apply them to athletics. I could apply them to anything. And it's interesting because that's basically my same message today. In fact, I was doing a podcast of some sort. I can't remember what. And one of my old students from way, way back, when I was teaching, when I was 16, and he was actually a high school teacher, but he was my student, right? And he said, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you're on the air. This is so great what you're doing." And he goes, "I actually have a couple articles that were written about you when you were in high school. Would you like to see them?" And I said, "Sure." So he sent them to me a couple of weeks ago. And interestingly enough, the things I was saying back then when I was being interviewed are the same things I'm saying when I'm on stage today. It was just like, wow, it was really a hoot.
And so you were brilliant then as well, right? Like the brilliance is just, it's good for you though. Is it cool how you can go back and see those things and see the journey that you've been on?
Yeah.
So you go into the corporate world. This is where I'm leading up to this, and those who are listening, I want you to just pay attention to this if you can hear me. By the way, I always joke, this is a side note, and this is probably the 3rd episode this has happened. As soon as I go live and I turn this on, the guy with the leaf blower shows up right outside my window. I swear, every time we go live, he is showing up, blowing the leaves out here. So those of you.
All right. Okay.
So, so you go into the corporate world, right? So what were you in school studying? I want to know how you make from playing football to the corporate world. What were you studying and how did that happen?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was at Northwestern University. I was a communication studies major. And I have to admit, I think when I first went there, I had been an econ major before, and that just really wasn't a fit. And I think I went into comm studies because I didn't have to do a foreign language, quite honestly, initially. Right. But interestingly enough, when I got into it, and now I'm a professional speaker, right? So it was so in alignment, and I was guided to that. And I was incredibly blessed because Procter & Gamble would actually go to Northwestern and recruit. So I'm in football practice one day. It's toward the end of my senior year. I think it was the last game of my career. And one of the offensive line coach came up to me, who I knew, but I never played for him. And he said, "What are you doing next Tuesday?" I said, "I don't know, coach. I mean, I'm done with football." He goes, "Procter & Gamble wants to talk to you." And in a span of 3 days, I had 3 interviews. 2 weeks after that, I was on my way to Cincinnati, and I had a job. So wow. I was incredibly blessed.
That's cool.
And I can't say enough about the experience I had with them. They treated me incredibly well.
Yeah.
I learned a ton. In fact, it was a real foundation for me from a business standpoint. All the things that I learned. Although, as you can probably appreciate, working in a corporate environment, it's very different when you become an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And I realized that, at P&G, if I didn't make a sale, if I missed a sale, I'd still get paid, at the end of the month. Of course, can't have that happen too often, but if I'm hitting most of them. But when I was sitting across the table from a mother of a 9-year-old, when I opened my own martial arts school, and I didn't make the sale, I didn't get paid. So it was it was like, didn't care how many accolades I had or the experience. It got real when you're an entrepreneur.
It's so true, right? I mean, I think that's what drives a lot of people too. So, okay, so I'm going to come back to that. But so you're in the corporate world, you said about 10 years?
10 years, yep.
And then you make a move. What was the first move you made out of the corporate world, and what drove you to do that?
Yeah. So my move out of the corporate arena was, and this is kind of a fun story, I think, too. I knew from within a year of me starting martial arts that my dream was to open up a school one day. In fact, somewhere in my files back here, I have an autobiography that I wrote when I was 11, and it's like, hey, when I was 1 year old, I did this. When I was 2, I did this. When I was 10, I wrote, I started Taekwondo. I'm now a blue belt, and one day I want to open my own school.
Oh, wow.
So that's what I did is I left the corporate environment. I started teaching at my son's grade school, opened it up, brought over about 50 students. And within 2 years, I had 200 students. And within 5 years, I had 500 students.
Oh, my goodness.
It just exploded. So that's what I did for 17 years until I sold it back in, I guess it'd be 2013.
Wow. So, I mean, what an inspiring story for everyone listening. Like, followed something that he wrote down as a kid. Like, Chris, that's so cool that you, even as a kid, you had the foresight to have a vision like this. And then I bet it was amazingly fulfilling to be living that, right?
It was incredible. And what's interesting is I think a lot of your listeners may relate to this, is I pushed that dream down a lot once I got older and I was in college, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to do the career. And I got married between my junior and senior year, and I had a baby very quickly. So I'm thinking, okay, job, career, etc. But it was always there. It was always in the background.
Yeah.
And so eventually I did it, and it was the best thing I ever did. And in fact, when I think of it now, had I have remained that course, I'm sure I would have done, well. I would have been happy in my corporate environment. But the impact that I was going to make in other people's lives and the fulfillment that I've had to date, it wouldn't have even been close.
Yeah, you felt like you could make the bigger impact doing that, right? Yeah, it's pretty cool. Amazing. There's several questions I want to dig on that, but so there's so many things I want to go there, but like what I really want to know is, like, first of all, tell the audience right now, what are you doing right now? Like, what's your world right now? And then I might come back a little bit.
Very good. So, well, I still am involved in martial arts. So, but now my students own the schools. So I oversee those, and I still train the students getting ready for black belt testing. And I do a lot of our public relations within our organization, et cetera. So I still love that work, but that's just a portion of what I do. I spend most of my time now, I do keynote speaking, I do trainings, and I do one-on-one life coaching. Wow. So it's a way for me. It's really the same principles, right, that I've always done before when I was teaching martial arts. But now I hope to be able to expand and reach a bigger audience. Because you have 1% to 2% of the population in the United States that does martial arts. So this is taking it that much further, and that goes from working, in the corporate arena and working in, with leadership teams, et cetera, all the way down. I do a lot of work with youth, high school, middle school, at-risk youth, et cetera. Because the message I have noticed, it really transfers. And even though the message that I may give to kids, there's elements that I use with adults, because I think we're all big kids anyway.
Yeah, right, right.
It's really universal.
So, so we have to talk later about the kids stuff, because I got some cool ideas I want to throw past you and stuff, right? So, and I can't divulge these things yet on this podcast because Connect hasn't come yet, and it's going to be here soon, and then we're going to make some announcements, but I can't say it yet.
All right. There's your teaser.
There's the hook, guys. It's you got to be a Connect to hear what's coming, and it's super exciting. So, I saw you at an event in Colorado. It was another person's event. You were a speaker there. I was there as an attendee, which was super cool to be there. And often, I'm in the room often I'm at events as a speaker. And so it was one of those fun events to be there as an attendee and really be listening to the messages that were there and kind of reflecting on my own things that I wanted to improve and so forth. And you did an activity about, where you break a board, right? Mm-hmm. And I just had to tell you, like, I've been a part of, I don't want to say similar because it wasn't, but I've been a part of trainings where people broke boards, right?
Yeah, sure.
I've done that before. But I have to tell you, the way you positioned it was brilliant. And it really caused me. So I'd done the activity. Here's the key. I've done the activity before, but I didn't do the thinking before the activity the way you did it. And so for those of you coming to Connect, I know you're going to do something similar, I believe. And so I just want to commend you because I thought the way you did it was brilliant. And it really caused me, someone going into that session, I mean, frankly, I'm just being transparent and honest. I was like, I've been there, done that. Like, that was my initial thought, and terrible to say that out loud. I apologize to you.
No worries.
But the way you transformed everyone in that room and people I was with, people who were there for Master Networks, I watched them go. And then, I went through the activity. I did it as well, and broke the board. And like, I just have to tell you, it was a really powerful thing. And so help those who are listening or maybe watching this on YouTube or Facebook to say, if they come to Connect, what could they expect, right? Because people are making their flights and they're going, oh man, I paid $200 for my ticket or whatever I paid, and now I got to pay another for the flight. And they're making the decision again. Yeah. What should they be thinking about that they want to know about the session they're going to have with you?
Well, I first of all, thanks so much for those words. That means a lot hearing that. That is one of my favorite things that I get to do. So it's really a true way of kind of taking my martial arts expertise in that world and bringing it into a layman's world, if you will. And just as I said before, that the same lessons that I'm teaching now when I do corporate trainings, et cetera, are the same things I did in martial arts. I always wanted to be able to use that martial art metaphor. And so I could physically teach someone to break a board in about 5 minutes, right? And you'd have the experience, but I want it to be something that touches people on an emotional level. I've literally had people go through that experience and they're crying tears of joy afterwards because it means something to them. And what I do within that course is I have 3 things that we look at. We look at creating a solid foundation for our life, right? What are the healthy habits that we embark upon? And I equate that then to the solid foundation you have when you are breaking a board. You have to have a solid foundation, with your legs. The next thing we talk about is the power of your voice. And not just the power of the voice in martial arts where we'll do our spirit yell. We call it a kiap in Korean martial arts. But what are the things you're saying to yourself that are holding you back? And also, what are the things you're saying and you may not even be conscious of to other people? Because our language is very important. And then the final principle we talk about is the idea of moving through the obstacle, not just to the obstacle. So, I know this as an entrepreneur myself. You're working, you get right up to it, and then life happens. And this is about, okay, how can you take a look at what your intention is? And then also, what's been the limiting beliefs that have held you back? And now let's move through those. And, I've got tons of stories of people that they see me at events afterwards and say, that board is still in my office. Right? Oh, yeah. It's still there as a reminder.
Yeah, I have mine in my home office, still there. Like I said, I have done the activity before, but it wasn't the same thing. So guys, if you're coming to Connect, you're like, oh, like I was, and shame on me, like been there, done that. It's not. I promise you, it's not. Thank you. You're going to want to be at this session because it's powerful. And I just have to tell you, not only was the way you presented it, like really changing for me to think about. For me, it was the voice, like the foundation piece. I really resonated with that, but it was the voice. And sometimes I like the way you said it. I remember I wrote down I remember the way you said it. And what I took from that was, and I even had conversations later that night. I remember one of the other speakers that was there, I visited with her and we had this kind of session. And I talked about that sometimes I go in these phases where I have this loud voice. Right, I say things that need to be said in the industry, opinionated, and I'm an advocate for entrepreneurs. And then all of a sudden, someone will pick on something I said, and I kind of pull that voice back again. Right, I kind of like, I kind of go in hiding a little bit again. And I was like, no, like this is a gift that this message needs to be shared to somebody. And you helped me through that piece, and that was something that I wrote on my board and broke through that. But guys, there was a place at some point in your presentation where there was a lady off to the one side who, man, she'd kind of done it 4, 5, 6 times. I'm sure you've seen this many, many times, but, and I could see her wanting to give up, like just physically, like, no, I can't do it. I can't do it. And you as a coach were so good to coach her through that and the way that you did it patiently. But there was another dynamic, and I want you to speak to this because I saw something else happen. And that wasn't what she did, and it wasn't necessarily what you did, but it was the way the room responded to her, right?
Yeah.
Right? You know what I'm talking about?
Totally know what you're talking about. Obviously, when we do this experience, I want everyone to break the board. And so far, knock on wood, everyone has. I've done this for over the years. But there is something magical when someone isn't able to break, and now they're in front of the room, and I'm able to coach them through, and they finally get that breakthrough because everyone is there. It takes a ton of courage to be up there by yourself anyway. But now you've seen everyone on the side breaking, and you're like, okay, I got this. Or maybe you're very nervous, and all of a sudden it doesn't go, and you're hitting it. But boy, the room explodes when you do. And I'll give you a little story. At the event that you were at, I did that same activity a couple of years before, and a woman came up, and it took her several times to break. And finally, when she broke, she hit it so hard, she fell into me, right? And she's crying, she's laughing at the same time. She's so happy. I saw her 6 months later, and she said, not only is that board still in her office, but she said, I just finished my latest book, and there's a section in my book about that board break.
Wow.
It resonated with her. And this was a woman who, I'm sure most of her life has not been athletic at all. She's not been able to express physically. But we want to be able to use as a metaphor. And what I tell people is use that experience then, what you've placed on the board, what you've written on it in the breakthrough, and refer back to it often. Because I didn't get that. I just helped them access something that was already there.
Oh.
It's already there.
Yeah. So, okay, there's something to really think about, everyone listening. Like, most of us already have inside of us what we need to break through, but what are we waiting for? Like, it's like, it's almost like some of them were waiting for the permission to be physical, like
right.
Kind of just like, weren't fully committed to it. There you go. Right.
Totally.
And they need that permission. So like, you guys, you don't need permission. No one's coming to give it to you anyway. Just do it.
Exactly. And what I found is, and this is in many of the aspects that I work, that many people will stay where they're at, not because it's comfortable necessarily. In fact, it could be very painful, but they stay there because it's familiar, because they don't know really what's on the other side. They know it's something they want, but they can deal with the pain because they've been dealing it with for years because it's familiar. But being able to break through, go to the other side, there's a lot of fear on the other side. They don't know what it is. But man, I'll tell you what, on the other side of that, I can almost guarantee you there's going to be this huge burst of energy. And that can oftentimes be the catalyst to take people, to a place they've never thought of going before.
Yeah, I thought there was another, such a great point. I thought there was another cool point that I've witnessed a couple of people, especially like, careful but like sometimes there's men who don't get like, maybe it's given that, oh, they're stronger or whatever it is, like they're going to play. And then like, there was a couple of guys that didn't break it the first time. Right. But what I thought was really interesting to me was, I think for them, they thought, oh man, I didn't break it. Everyone's kind of like, well, how come you didn't break it? And the opposite was true. Everyone was like, you got this, you're going to get it. Like, it was supportive. And I think as entrepreneurs, we sometimes we stumble or we fall or something doesn't work out the way we want it. And we think everyone around us is going to go, look at, you didn't get it. And yet I don't think that's the truth or the case at all. As entrepreneurs, we want to support each other. And I'm sure
absolutely. And well, you're a great speaker, Chaz. I've heard you several times, and all of us as speakers, that was one of the things I needed to learn is, when you're up speaking and trying to inspire an audience, it isn't just about all your successes. People relate to us because we've overcome a challenge, right? And all of us do. And the more we try to hide that, the less authentic we show up. But the more we share that, I think the more we inspire others to be able to do the same.
So true. Like I joked one time that I've cried on stage twice at Connect. Like, could happen again, right? But it's just me. Like, I get overwhelmed with the trust that people put in me. I think sometimes it's touching to hear the stories of the sacrifices people make to even be at the event. Right. And also we always do for those who haven't been to Connect and you're listening to this, we always do a flag ceremony prior. Young JROTC kids bring in the flag and we sing the national anthem. And I'm always just touched about the opportunity we have as entrepreneurs to pave our own path. But the point is, when I did it the first time, I got choked up on stage, and I kind of left the stage thinking, because I'd been trained, don't ever let them see you cry. Like that was literally a training in a speaking class I went to. It said, don't ever let them see you cry. And so like I walked off the stage and I thought, dang it, I know better. Like I'm a pro. Like this doesn't happen, right? You don't. And man, more people came up to me and said, man, you really touched me today. You really, I appreciate that realness, right?
I'm with you, buddy. I'll tell you one of my favorite stories when I first started speaking. I think there was a time when, things weren't going the way that I wanted them to. And I'm on the phone with my mom, who I absolutely adore. She's just like, just one of the most important people in my life. And
yeah, sure.
I'm complaining, I can't get traction here and it's not working here. And she says, so you want to be one of those motivational speakers, right? And I said, yeah. And she said, do you think anyone's going to want to listen to you if everything in your life is perfect?
Oh.
And I was like, whoa, put my mom back on the phone. Who is this, right? But she was spot on.
Totally.
Spot on. It doesn't mean that you make sure you go through your process first. You don't want to be doing therapy on stage, but if you've got that emotion, that touches people's hearts.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So the message here, guys, is be authentic and be real in business,
right.
Because it's what connects you to people. So Chris, you're really good at that, by the way. I just want to commend you because you're really good at connecting with people. I've watched you from afar. I've watched you up close. I've seen you speak. Leave with our listeners something about how it is, like what's the skill that helps you? I know you just said like sharing some of those things, but is there anything else that really helps you connect with people in such a, I say natural, I know you've worked at it, but what makes it look natural for you, how you connect with others so easily?
Well, thank you for that, Chaz. And I think one of the first things that we can do, and it works in life, it works in entrepreneurship, et cetera, is be authentically curious about other people. Be curious when you're having those discussions. I mean, how often when we're entrepreneurs, we know in the back of our mind we need to make the sale. And are we having the discussion because we're doing the setup, or are we having the discussion because we really want to connect with them? Because
yes.
People feel that. I remember when I had my martial arts studio, there were times, and I'm not saying I was always good at this, but there were times where if it wasn't the right situation, I got to a point, if I couldn't serve, a potential student, if they came in, I would send them someplace else if I really knew we couldn't serve what they were looking for. And people appreciate that.
Yes.
And I think that also there's making sure that we're curious and that we really do our best to listen. And I'm talking about listen on a deep level, not strategizing what your next line's going to be. Because many times, and I'm sure you can attest to this, there might be a service that you want to provide to someone, and it's totally off from another thing you might be able to provide once you're in that conversation.
So this is the interesting thing about what you just said. Podcasting is new for me on this, like to be the interviewer, right? And I just come into it trying to listen to your point, like not trying to think. I mean, I have no scripted questions. I have nothing. And so I just come into it going, I want to be curious about you. I said that right before we started, right? I said, I'm not going to ask you much questions. We're just going to hit record and see where this goes. But I think that I'm just curious about who you are. And so I appreciate you saying that about being curious. Like if you're curious about people, what I'm hearing you say, if you're curious and genuine, you're not listening to respond, you're listening to hear.
Right.
That allows you to make more connection. The only downside to that in podcasting is then I'm like trying to think of what is the next question, because I was so focused on what I was listening to. But it serves you well. I know it does. It serves you well in business. What do you think? One other last thing you would say to people about just how they can in this climate? I mean, I think we're looking right now, and in most places the economy is strong, right? Like in most of our master networks, people, they're in economies that are pretty strong right now. We've been through both. I think most people in business have been through a good and a bad and whatever. What would you tell somebody right now when it's good? Like when things feel strong right now, and maybe you can, put that into some martial arts experience too. Like when I'm feeling good and maybe I'm successful, whatever. What should I know now in a successful environment that I need to be thinking about?
Well, I'm going to equate it to a martial arts experience. In martial arts, a black belt is the master of the basics. And that's really what it is. And I think as entrepreneurs, particularly when business is good and things are flowing well, still continue to work your basics. Still continue to work your basics, whatever those are. It's easy to go back to those, or maybe we're incented to go back to or go to those when things aren't working well. Okay, I got to sharpen up. But it's just like if you were to want to maintain an ideal body weight, doing up and down, the binging is not going to be healthy for you, but just doing the steady activity. What are your basics? In martial arts, kicking, punching, whatever, in terms of entrepreneurship, how are you looking at your client list? Are you making telephone calls? I mean, what are the things that you need to be doing consistently? And then make sure you're doing them and schedule time for them. Because like when I work with coaching clients, one of the things that I see is that people don't schedule the most important activities. And it just needs to be something that's just part of their daily and weekly routines.
Yeah, it's like the week happens to them versus them making the week happen. Right. It's like the byproduct of whatever's going on around them.
And for me, I do my best work first thing in the morning.
Yes.
And that's how I coach people too, unless they're unconscious in the morning. Get it done first. Yeah. And then let the rest of the day unfold, because the 2 times a day that we have the greatest control of is first thing in the morning and right before we go to bed.
Yeah.
Stuff in between, oftentimes we don't have a say.
Well, we're often like our cell phones in many ways. Like the battery's charged in the morning, like that's where we are, and throughout the day, right?
Love
we
it.
have very little things during the day to plug into to recharge. So, but what you just said about the basics, I hope everyone listening really takes that to heart for whatever the basics are for your business. And in most of our businesses, it always revolves around some sort of lead generation of new clients and reaching out to new people to grow our business, what feeds it. But you hear what Chris is saying? It's like master the basics before, like, I think often when things are good, we start to get creative, right? Because while it's working, it's like it works so good, I stopped doing it, right? So now I'm going to stop. But that creativity sometimes gets the best of us in those spots. Chris, I'm super excited about you being at Connect. Like,
me too.
This is going to be amazing. Guys, if you're coming to Connect, first of all, if you're not registered for Connect, we're about sold out, if not sold out already. I just have to check with the team. But this is going to be an amazing event. And I just want to encourage you to be at. So Chris, the way he's going to do it, he's going to do a keynote, but he's also going to have a breakout where you're going to have a breakthrough.
There you go.
So be a part of that. Sign up for that. Get that on your agenda to be part of that. Any last parting words of wisdom they should know as they prepare to come to Connect?
Well, the one thing I guess I would say is have an intention for what you would like to experience. I'm talking to the listeners now. Have an intention. If there's a part of your business, there's a part of, whether it's specific business acumen or strategies, or if it's dealing with staff or whatever, but go in with an intention of something you'd like to have pull out, take from the experience. And then the other thing that I always tell people when they go to conferences, because they're going to be a ton of great speakers, a ton of great information, is then be very specific afterwards when they're, they put their notes together, whatever, choose one thing you're going to focus on.
Yes. And
then get that hammered and then go to the next thing, because many times you got 10 things on a list, you try to do 10 things well, you do 10 things you don't do anything well, right? So get specific, prioritize those things, but come with an intention, because when you set the intention, you will be surprised how you'll start hearing things that will support that intention.
So to that point, I just want to add to what you said. I had a mentor a couple of years ago. I used to go to conferences all the time, and I would take notes and stuff, and like most people do, but then I had notes in this thing and notes in that thing. And now what I've been doing for years, and so guys, to his intentionality point, is I have the same notebook that when I go to events, I take notes in all the same notebooks, because the problem was I would take notes and I'd never go back and look at them. So it's like whatever was closest on my mind was the one thing I took, but I never went back and looked at them. But now, because I carry this with me all the time, I always go back and look at those. And so I can be intentional about, oh yeah, that's right, when you said this before, and so forth. So, get something that you're taking notes with everywhere you go, and every place you hear it. So Chris, thank you for being on Connect, Share, Prosper. Guys, remember, First of all, Connect is coming up. Be a part of that. But remember, you're only one relationship away from changing your future, and that relationship could be closer than you think. And this is a man you should be in a relationship with. So go find him on social media. Where can they find you?
They can find me on Facebook. They can find me on LinkedIn. In fact, as soon as we're off here, I'll be writing. I do a weekly blog called The Mind of a Champion Tip of the Week. So that comes out in written form, as well as I do a Facebook Live every Tuesday on that, which is a little snippet of hopefully life and business leadership that they can use to spur them ahead in the week ahead.
Love it. Love it. So guys, get into Chris's world, reach out to him, connect with him, and listen, we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks again, Chris.
All right. Thanks, Jeff.